Hello everyone. Tonight we journey back to a time of marble domes and moonlit fountains, jeweled turbans and silk-draped balconies. The air is heavy with the scent of roses and sandalwood. You're somewhere deep in 17th century Agra, where the Mughal Empire is at its height, opulent, orderly, and ruled by royal duty. But in the quiet corners of one lush palace garden, a very different story is beginning. You're standing beneath an arched pavilion at the edge of the royal grounds. The marble floor is cool beneath your bare feet, and the sky above is impossibly dark. One of those inky, indigo nights where even the stars seem hushed. A light breeze stirs the mango trees, and the garden's wide stone fountains glimmer under the moon. The guards are asleep at their posts. The courtiers are locked behind ornate doors, dreaming of rubies and scrolls. And you? You are not where you're supposed to be. Because tonight, you're a Mughal prince. Bored of court rituals, tired of rehearsed praises and pre-chosen brides, you've slipped away from the harem wing. You've left behind politics and poetry recitals and entered the place the old queens say is enchanted, the southern gardens. But be warned, you're about to fall in love, and trust me, you probably won't survive this in one piece. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'd love to know. Now draw your shawl a little closer. The night is warm, but what's coming next might give you a chill. The southern garden is older than most parts of the palace. Built by the emperor's grandfather, it's a crescent-shaped labyrinth of marble walkways and sunken flower beds, watered by narrow aqueducts that hum softly with every breeze. It's quieter than the newer royal gardens. Too quiet, many say. Some believe it's haunted by the women who once wept for lost sons or vanished lovers. But tonight, you feel only a peaceful strangeness. You wander among perfumed hedges. Pale flowers bloom like stars from the earth itself. The paths are overgrown here, not abandoned, but not freshly kept either. You notice tiny flickers of firelight through the foliage ahead. It's a lamp, not one of the palace brass torches, but a clay oil lamp glowing from the base of a low archway carved with lilies. And beyond it, you hear humming, low, tuneless, sweet. Someone is working. A figure kneels near a patch of water lilies, trimming their leaves with practiced ease. She doesn't see you yet. Her hair is bound in a dark scarf, her hands covered in soil. She wears the uniform of a palace gardener, one of the lowest ranks among the workers. Most of them are men, but here is a girl, barefoot and alone, with a curved iron tool and a small cloth bundle by her side. You step forward, out of the shadows. A twig cracks underfoot. She looks up. You freeze? Not from fear? Exactly. But from something sharper, stranger. Like being caught in a moment you weren't meant to witness. Her eyes are large and dark, framed by the soft flicker of the oil lamp. Her expression isn't one of panic, just quiet, measured surprise. A slight tilt of the head, a raised brow, then back to work. She doesn't bow. She doesn't scream, which, given your princely robes and entirely unauthorized presence, is frankly surprising. And then she speaks, quietly. You're not supposed to be here. You blink. Neither are you. She laughs just once. It's more of a breath than a sound. I work here, she replies, matter of fact. You glance around, unsure how to continue. You've been trained in politics, calligraphy, and falconry. You've been praised in poems and fed delicacies by handmaidens who flatter your every glance. But no one ever taught you how to talk to someone planting lilies in the middle of the night. "What are you planting?" you ask, finally. She glances at you again, gauging something, then gestures to a small seed pouch. Not planting. Weeding. They crowd each other if you don't. A pause. "You're the younger prince, aren't you?" she adds casually. "The one who reads." You stare. "How do you?" She shrugs. Everyone talks. There's a long silence. Then quietly, "Your poetry is too sad, but your handwriting is nice." You don't know whether to laugh or apologize. You're not used to this calm, even rhythm of conversation, free of ceremony and hidden meanings. She picks up her lamp, rises slowly, and dusts her hands off on her scarf. She starts to walk away. You call out, without thinking, "What's your name?" She pauses halfway under the archway. "Why?" You don't have an answer. She smiles faintly, as though she expected that, then vanishes into the darkness, taking the light with her. You stand alone beneath the stars. The scent of crushed lilies clings to your sleeves. You don't sleep that night. You'll return tomorrow. The next day is long. Too long. You sit through court petitions with your father, the emperor, an endless stream of land disputes, taxation updates, and political flattery. Courtiers fidget in silk robes, scribes scratch notes in their ledgers, and the smell of sandalwood, incense, drifts in slow, smothering waves. Every once in a while, someone turns to ask your opinion, and you mumble something princely, balanced, thoughtful, vague, but your thoughts are not in the room. They're back in the southern gardens, back with the girl who didn't flinch, who told you your poems were sad, and then simply walked away. You don't even know her name, and somehow, this seems more urgent than the empire's entire treasury. As evening finally cools the palace walls, you slip away again, this time in plainer clothes. No jewelry, no royal turban, just a long linen tunic, simple slippers, and a borrowed scarf to shadow your face. You know the southern path now, past the lotus pool, under the neem trees, through the moon gate with its chipped marble lion. This time, your heart pounds louder than your footsteps. The garden is quieter tonight, but alive. Crickets, frogs, the soft hiss of moving water. You spot a flicker of light under the same archway. She's there again. This time, she's trimming vines from a cracked trellis, standing on a stone bench to reach the tallest ones. Her scarf is tied differently, and a few curls fall across her cheek. You clear your throat, a polite cough to announce your presence. She doesn't turn. "Back so soon?" You smile. "I have questions about your weeding technique." Now she turns, arms crossed, chin slightly raised. "Did you come here just to mock my gardening?" I came here because you told me the truth." She studies you in silence, then hops down from the bench, dusting her palms. "Well," she says, "that was yesterday." You gesture to the path. "May I walk with you?" She considers, then nods slowly. You fall into step beside her. The garden is dim, but lit by memory. Your memory. You know each curve of the path. Now, you glance at her as she walks, barefoot and unbothered, and you notice her watching the plants more than you, like they're her true conversation partners, and you're just a visiting wind. "What should I call you?" you ask at last. She doesn't stop walking. "People call me Parveen." It means star. Fitting. She doesn't ask for your name. Instead, she kneels beside a cluster of tuberoses and starts pruning gently. You crouch beside her, watching. "Why do you work at night?" you ask. She shrugs. "The sun burns the flowers in the day, and most people don't notice when you're gone at night." A silence settles between you, soft as moss. Then she speaks again, without looking up. "My mother worked these gardens too. She used to sing to the flowers, said they bloomed better if they heard stories." You smile. "Then I'll tell them one." She raises an eyebrow, intrigued. So you begin. Not a royal decree or polished poem, but a story about a wandering king who lost his sandals to a crocodile and had to walk barefoot through the desert, learning the names of every thorny plant just to survive. She laughs quietly when the king gets tricked by a clever desert fox and has to bribe his way out with a necklace made of dates. "I've never heard a prince tell a story like that," she says. You lean back on your elbows. "You've never heard a prince lie down in the mud before, either." "No," she agrees, "but it suits you." You grin. Then something curious happens. A soft splash. A frog lands in the nearby pool, sending ripples across the water. And just like that, she stands. It's late. You want to ask her to stay, but instead, you rise too. She walks you back toward the outer path. Neither of you speak. The silence isn't awkward, just slow, like syrup, like time moving reluctantly forward. At the edge of the garden, just before the mango trees begin, she stops. "You shouldn't come here too often," she says. "People notice things." You nod. She turns, disappears into the green, but this time, she leaves something behind. A small sprig of jasmine placed on the stone bench where she was sitting. You pick it up. The petals are already beginning to wilt, but the scent is still sharp, sweet, clinging to your fingers. Back in your chamber, long after the lamps are blown out and the moon has moved across the sky, you tuck the jasmine sprig into a book of poetry and close it gently. You don't write a new poem tonight. You don't need to. The next morning, the court is abuzz with rumors of unrest along the western border. Traders from Persia are demanding lower tariffs. A provincial governor has apparently decided his own taxes are optional. Your father, the emperor, is furious in the restrained, dangerous way that powerful men reserve for other powerful men. You sit beside him again, a ceremonial observer, dressed once more in layers of gold-threaded cotton and polished shoes that pinch your toes. Every gesture is watched, every word a potential dagger or lifeline. But all you can think about is a sprig of jasmine pressed between 2 pages and a girl who works among the roots. "Pay attention," your father snaps, his voice low enough not to carry but sharp enough to sting. "One day this will all be yours. You cannot afford to daydream." You nod respectfully. "Of course, father." But you are already wondering how Parveen would describe the scene. Probably something like, "A room full of peacocks, pretending to be dragons." You hide a smile behind your sleeve. Later that evening, you wait until well after the palace begins to quiet, until the servants' footsteps fade and the moonlight casts soft silver shadows across the courtyard tiles. You slip out again, this time with a small book tucked under your arm, a copy of the Masnavi, one of Rumi's great poetic epics, a subtle offering if she'll have it. The southern garden is cooler tonight. A wind moves through the tall trees, and the scent of damp earth carries the memory of last night's jasmine. You walk slowly, listening, half hoping, half doubting. But there she is again. Parveen stands near a cluster of flowering shrubs, gently winding twine around a leaning branch to help it straighten. Her head is uncovered tonight, hair braided simply, a single flower tucked behind her ear. She looks up, unsurprised. "You again," she says. You hold up the book like a peace offering. "For your flowers. They like stories, don't they?" She takes it, flipping through a few pages. "You're braver than most men in this palace." You raise an eyebrow. "For bringing poetry to a garden?" "No," she replies, "for letting a woman see the inside of your mind." That silences you for a moment. She walks slowly toward a bench and sits. You follow, but sit a little apart, trying to read the mood, the space she keeps around herself, like a second skin. She opens the book again. "Read me something." So you do. You read Rumi's lines slowly, letting each word unfurl like petals in spring. The moment you accept what troubles you've been given, the door will open. The garden is quiet now. Even the insects seem to hush for the verse. She doesn't speak for a long time. Then she says, almost to herself, "My mother used to recite this before she fell ill." You glance at her. Do you still miss her? She nods, but doesn't elaborate. Instead, she closes the book gently. "You're not what I expected," she says. "Because I'm a prince? Because you're not pretending to be anything else." That stirs something deep in your chest, something equal parts pride and fear. You want to ask about her life, about where she sleeps, what she eats, whether she has siblings. But you stop yourself. Not yet. You sense the walls are still up, delicate but firmly held. Instead, you gesture toward the roses. "Tell me which flower hates being touched." She smiles. "The marigold. She sulks for days." You both laugh softly. It's a shared joke, one that no courtier would understand. The night grows thicker. A small owl hoots in the distance, and the fountain gurgles nearby like a sleepy child. She stands. You should go. You hesitate, then rise. "Will you be here tomorrow?" "I don't know," she replies, but this time her eyes say maybe. She hands the book back to you. "Keep it," you say. She doesn't argue. You walk away slowly, the path unfamiliar in reverse, your heart lingering behind like a loyal hound. That night, sleep finds you easily. Not because you're untroubled, but because you've begun to understand something your tutors never taught you. Peace isn't in power or palaces. It's in moments like these. Moments stolen from duty, hidden in moonlit corners, bound together by poetry and plants. The next day begins as all royal days do, slowly but with inevitability. A procession of obligations rolls toward you like thunderclouds, petitions to review, maps to study, languages to recite. The tutors arrive, eyes expectant. The viziers drone. The servants adjust your silks as if the world depends on the crispness of your cuffs. But your mind drifts. You find yourself sketching flowers in the margins of your scrolls. Not symbolic lotuses or imperial lilies. The flowers Parveen pointed out. The marigold with its stubborn pride. The bashful jasmine. A vine that, in your dream last night, curled around your wrist like a promise. At noon, you break from studies early and walk alone toward the rear courtyard, an area rarely visited by nobles. From there, a discreet stairwell leads down to the old kitchen gardens, now mostly repurposed, yet still fragrant with history. You don't find her there. Instead, you meet her scent. Jasmine again, but fading. You linger a while, hoping, but she does not come. That evening, you return to the southern garden. The moon is high and round, a glowing coin tossed into the dark. She's waiting this time, perched on the edge of the marble fountain, trailing her fingers in the water. "You came back," she says, not looking at you. "I wasn't sure you would." She glances at you now. "I wasn't either." You walk toward her slowly. "The book. Did you finish it?" "I've read it twice," she says, and once aloud to the pomegranate tree. "And?" "It cried," she deadpans. You laugh. Sensitive fruit. The air between you is easier now, warmed by the slow burn of trust. She pats the bench beside her, and you sit. Not too close, but closer than before. "Tell me something," she says. "Anything. What do you want?" The question catches you off guard. You, who are supposed to want conquest and legacy, and children with names ending in the great. You pause. "I want quiet," you say finally. "Not forever. Just sometimes. A space where I don't have to become anyone." She nods. "You want a garden?" You smile. "Yes, I want a garden." She turns to you fully now, her knees drawn up slightly on the bench. "You know this can't last," she says. Your smile fades. "Why not?" "You're a prince. I plant things. That's not a story people tell." "But it could be," you say, too quickly. She looks at you with something unreadable in her gaze. You still don't understand how this world works. "Then teach me," you say. "If the world is cruel, make it kinder in your voice." A breeze stirs. Somewhere nearby, a nightjar calls. The garden seems to listen. She doesn't answer directly. Instead, she says, "My father was a weaver. He once told me, if the loom catches fire, don't try to rescue the thread. Save your hands." You absorb this. And what would that mean now? "It means," she says, "you don't risk your whole life for something just because it's beautiful." You lean back, feeling the weight of that. "But what if I'm willing to risk it?" "Then you'll need stronger hands," she murmurs. You're not sure whether she's challenging or warning you, maybe both. Still, she doesn't leave, and neither do you. Instead, she begins to hum, a low, winding tune without words. Something from childhood, perhaps. You listen, enchanted. Your breath slows. Even the stars above seem to pause. When she finishes, you say, "Will you teach me that?" She smiles softly. "It's not a song. It's a prayer." "For what? For patience?" Silence settles between you again, this time more comforting than uncertain. Then she reaches into a fold of her tunic and pulls something out, a tiny cloth pouch. She presses it into your hand. "For you?" she says. You open it. Inside are small dried petals, rose, marigold, and something unfamiliar. A personal blend, delicate and fragrant. "For sleep?" you ask. "For memory," she says, "so you don't forget where the beauty came from." You close the pouch reverently and tuck it into your pocket. "I won't forget," you promise. She stands. "You should go." This time, you rise with her, slower. "Tomorrow?" you ask. "Tomorrow," she agrees. As you make your way back to your quarters, the scent from the pouch rises gently from your clothes. You lie down without lighting the lantern, the shadows of the garden still dancing behind your eyes. You sleep deeply, and for the first time in many months, without dreams of war. The morning after that second meeting, you wake up not to the chimes of servants or the scrape of sandals on polished floors, but to the softness of sunlight playing across your pillow. You feel unusually rested, as if sleep itself had paused to hold your thoughts gently overnight. The scent from the pouch she gave you still lingers faintly, earthy, sweet, grounding. At breakfast, you barely taste the saffron rice or rosewater milk. The court buzzes as usual. Petitions to review, foreign dignitaries to greet, ceremonial scripts to rehearse, but none of it lands. Your mind floats back to the southern garden, to the way Parveen said patience like it was something noble, not just a delay. You carry the pouch with you, tucked deep within your robe, near your chest. Not out of superstition exactly, more like quiet defiance. By midday, your father summons you. The emperor's hall is high and cool, draped with silks in the empire's colors, emerald, ivory, and rust. Your father sits upon the jade throne, his posture flawless, his beard flecked with gray but immaculately oiled. His eyes are unreadable. Beside him stands your cousin, Prince Hamid, always perfectly dressed, always listening too hard. The emperor speaks without preamble. "You've been visiting the kitchen gardens." You nod slowly. "I have. Why?" You pause. "To learn." Your father lifts one brow. "About irrigation?" "About perspective." A small, surprised smile touches the emperor's lips. "And who is teaching you perspective?" You don't answer. "I'll tell you who she is," Hamid offers smoothly. "Parveen, daughter of the old gardener who lost favor last year. She sings to flowers and neglects court protocol." You glance at him. "And yet her garden still thrives." Hamid's smile tightens. "She has opinions." Your father raises a hand. "Enough." He leans forward slightly, studying you the way a jeweler might assess a flawed ruby. "Do you like this girl?" You hesitate. A dangerous question. "I respect her," you say carefully. "She is wise." "Is she beautiful?" You consider your answer then. "Yes, but not in the way paintings try to capture. She's real, like rain." The emperor leans back, fingers drumming on the carved armrest. "This is not the story our bloodline is meant to tell," he murmurs. "But I, too, once loved someone like rain." The admission catches you off guard. "What happened?" you ask. "I married your mother," he says, "and she became my son." Silence follows. You bow, not out of surrender, but acknowledgement. Later, you find yourself avoiding the southern garden. You pace near the old library instead, among the neglected scrolls and forgotten maps. The sun dips low, and still you hesitate. A part of you wonders, will she be there? Eventually, your feet decide. For you. You descend the southern steps, heart beating too loudly. The shadows are long, the fountain still, the air tinged with orange blossoms and dusk. And there she is, leaning against the stone wall, arms folded, eyes amused. "I thought maybe you'd gotten bored," she says. "Never," you reply, breathless. She walks toward you, slow and unhurried. "Then why the delay?" You take her hands, suddenly brave. "Because I wanted to come back, choosing it, not needing to, choosing you." She stares at you for a long time, and you brace for laughter, dismissal, some clever quip. Instead, she lifts your hand and places it on her cheek. Her skin is cool and soft, like damp petals. "You're still a fool," she murmurs. "But I like your foolishness." You sit together on the edge of the fountain again. This time, the silence is like a shared cloak. Safe. Familiar. "Tell me something about your world," she says, resting her head lightly on your shoulder. You think for a moment. "In my world, every gift is questioned. Every smile comes with a footnote. Nothing is ever just offered." She nods against you. "That sounds exhausting." "It is," you admit. "My world is smaller," she says. "But things grow here." You tilt your head to kiss her hair gently. "I'd like to learn how," you whisper. And so she teaches you. Not all at once. Not with rules. But in little ways. The next day, she shows you how to recognize when soil is too proud to hold water. The day after, how basil plants prefer whispers over direct sun. She speaks of plants like they're people. Some stubborn, some thirsty for attention, some dreaming of distant hills. You listen, not just to her words, but to the spaces between them. And she listens to you in return. In the garden, you're not a prince. You're just a boy learning to care for things. Some nights, you don't meet. Some days, she sends a leaf folded into the shape of a crane. Other days, you leave her riddles hidden in the roots of the rose bush. And through it all, something blooms. Not loud, not grand, just quietly unstoppable. The monsoon arrives earlier than expected that year. You wake to the sound of soft drumming on the stone balcony. Rain, insistent and warm, pattering like fingers on a drum. The sky is a sheet of pewter, and the air smells of wet earth and jasmine. You wait until the downpour softens, then pull your robe tighter and make your way, hoodless, sandal-footed, through the palace corridors toward the garden. By now, the guards no longer question your movements. They exchange glances, but no one speaks. Servants look away with the kind of practiced disinterest that only deep court life can teach. You find her barefoot under the neem tree, arms stretched wide, head tilted back as if drinking the rain. Her hair is soaked, her dress clinging to her knees. Her laugh, real and musical, rises above the drizzle. You watch for a moment. Then she sees you. "You're late," she says, her lips curved into that sly smile. "You're early," you reply. Or maybe the sky is. She walks toward you, leaving muddy footprints behind her. When she reaches you, she doesn't stop. She presses her hands to your chest and pushes you gently beneath the eaves. "You'll catch your death," she murmurs, though there's laughter in her eyes. "Then I'll be a very content ghost," you answer. She snorts, poetic and ridiculous. You brush a wet strand of hair from her face. "You know what the court poet said about the rain?" She leans in. "Enlighten me. That the monsoon is the earth's love letter to the sky, longing, delayed, and always inevitable." She blinks. "That's actually beautiful." "He died of heartbreak." She grins. "Ah, there it is." You sit together beneath the neem tree, listening to the drops tapping rhythmically above. She hands you a tiny bundle wrapped in banana leaf. "What's this?" "Green mango with black salt," she says. "My mother used to give it to me during the rains. Clears the mind, opens the senses." You nibble it, wincing at the sharp tang, and she bursts into giggles. "You're hopeless," she says. "But open-minded," you counter, tongue still puckered. "Barely." The air hums with petrichor impossibility. Then she grows quiet. Her fingers trace slow circles on your palm. "There's a man," she says finally, "from the northern hills, a merchant's son. My father liked him." You go still. "And?" "He was kind. Brought me a carved hair comb once, but he only saw the garden as backdrop, not as something alive." You watch her, unsure where this is going. "Last week," she continues, "he returned, asked again. Said the rains reminded him of me." You feel something tighten in your chest. "And what did you say?" She looks up at you, her eyes dark and unreadable. "I told him the rains reminded me of someone else." You exhale slowly. The world narrows to the rhythm of rain and the warmth of her beside you. Still, something in her tone lingers. A weight. She rests her head against your shoulder. "This, us. It can't last forever, can it?" You want to protest, to offer some grand promise. But the words catch. No, you admit. Not the way we'd want it to. Then let's not want too much, she whispers. Let's just be. You nod, unable to speak. For the next hour, you do nothing but breathe together. The rain softens to mist and the world hushes. No empire, no gardens, no names, just you, just her. 2 stories, briefly woven together. Later, as you part ways, her hands lingering in yours, you ask, "Why do you always seem ready for the end?" She looks over her shoulder. "Because the garden taught me," she says, "that everything beautiful is seasonal." And then she disappears into the green. You stay there, long after she's gone, listening to the plants whisper in the damp breeze. That night, you don't sleep, not because of anxiety, but because your heart is full in a way that feels too delicate for dreams. In the quiet dark, you begin to compose a letter, not for her, not for court, but for yourself. A record of the garden, of the girl, of the rain. You write until dawn. The dry season returns with the same stealth as a thief. Days stretch long and golden. The rain now a memory hanging heavy in the air. The garden blooms less wildly, its edges trimmed, its colors muted, but she is still there, beneath the banyan, pruning a hibiscus with hands as deft as ever. You've begun to notice something shift, not in her, it's you. Every encounter carries a layer of ache beneath its joy, a murmur of something unsaid. You start to measure time, not in hours or prayers, but in moments between glances, between touches, between the knowledge of how fragile this has become. That morning, your father, emperor in name, storm in mood, calls you to his private chamber. He has aged, lines deeper, voice lower. He holds a letter in his hand and doesn't offer you a seat. "There is a suggestion," he begins. "From the court in Bukhara, they propose a marriage alliance. You still." She is said to be fluent in Persian, writes poetry, good stock, quiet temperament, a beneficial match. You clear your throat. "Father, She need not be loved," he interrupts. "She need only be loyal. You are no longer a boy." His gaze is cold, but not cruel, practical, sharp as a blade left in ice. You bow your head, throat tight. Of course. That night, you walk the palace gardens barefoot, cool tiles against your skin, the moon casting silver across the canopy. You find her where you always do. This time, she's humming, low and tuneless, more like a whisper. She turns when she hears your steps. "You walk like a prince again," she teases. Then pauses. What happened? You hesitate. Then you sit beside her and tell her everything. The letter, the girl, the deal struck before you were even born. She listens without interruption, her expression unreadable. When you finish, there is silence. Then, "I thought as much." You blink. "You did?" She nods. Palace girls talk. Servants hear. Gardeners notice things. You want to say something comforting, something clever, but you can't find it. I should be angry, she says instead, very softly. You should, but I'm not. Why not? Because I never expected to keep you. Those words sting more than anything. You don't speak. She turns to look at the moon. Tell me, my prince, will you write her poems? You take a long breath. I'll write her silence. She huffs a breath of a laugh. That might be crueler than poetry. You shift to face her, holding her hand. This has been the most real thing I've ever known. I know. She squeezes your fingers. That's why I won't ruin it by pretending. The garden seems to still with her words. She rises, brushes off her skirts. Walk me back? She asks. You do. Slowly. The path's familiar now under your feet. At the palace gate, where you always part, she stops, turns. Do one thing for me? She asks. Anything. When you look at her, whoever she is, don't look through her. You nod. She touches your cheek once, gently. Good night, my prince. And she's gone, for real this time. The moon watches you. You don't cry. Princes aren't taught to. But in the space behind your ribs, something gives way, like a thread quietly snapped in the dark. The next day, you go to the chamberlain and request an official poet to be assigned to your quarters. Not for the court, not for songs, but for a letter. The kind no one but she will ever read. Weeks pass, like grains slipping through a finely carved hourglass. The engagement is announced in a muted ceremony, befitting the tense political winds blowing through the empire. There are no grand parades, just a formal reading of intentions, signed with gold ink and silence. Courtiers bow, scribes record, servants exchange glances, but say nothing. You sit beside your father, stoic, while an envoy from Bukhara bows with the weight of his kingdom on his shoulders. You do not look at him, or the scroll he presents, or the portrait of the girl they say will be your bride. You already know the shape of this cage, but your heart, it lingers elsewhere. The official poet you requested arrives quietly, cloaked in ochre and a beard like river moss. He bows low, eyes twinkling. You wish to speak what you cannot say aloud, Highness? You nod. He smiles. Then we will write in invisible ink, the kind only soul can read. Over the next few nights, you dictate, not to him, but beside him. He listens, more than he writes, sometimes murmuring phrases in the ancient tongue of Hindavi, sometimes sighing as if the stars themselves have heard your grief before. You describe her laugh, the way her hands brushed the soil like it was sacred, how the air changed when she entered a room, even when the room was nothing more than a vine-covered corner of the outer garden. You say things you could never say to her face. I wanted to build her a palace of petals. She taught me silence was not emptiness. She never asked for anything, and yet I gave her everything I had left. The poet transcribes with a brush so thin the words appear like whispers on the parchment. When he's done, he rolls the scroll, binds it with green silk, and hands it back to you. Do you wish this burned, buried, hidden? You shake your head, and the next morning, before first prayer, you walk alone to the garden. She is not there. Of course she's not. She hasn't been for weeks now. They say her family was relocated. Quietly, respectfully, generously, to a distant village near the mountains. A parting gift, they called it. You find the banyan tree, the same one. The roots remember. Beneath its shade, you dig, gently, as she once did, until the earth gives you a small, secret hollow. You place the scroll inside, wrap it in oilcloth, cover it once more, not for hiding, for memory, and maybe, one day, for return. The wedding procession is set for the coming spring. Every corner of the palace awakens with preparations. Velvet is dyed. Gold is spun into threads so fine they float on air. Musicians rehearse pieces so soft they sound like sighs. You, meanwhile, play the role of groom, as if it were just another mask in the court's eternal masquerade. Your bride arrives weeks ahead of schedule, accompanied by 6 ladies in waiting, an old tutor, and 2 white peacocks. She is graceful, composed, dressed in pearls and soft indigo. She speaks gently and does not ask many questions. You speak gently back and do not offer many answers. At night, you lie beneath the great domed ceiling of your private chamber, eyes tracing the constellations painted there in lapis and gold. You wonder if she's watching the same stars from wherever she's gone. One night, days before the ceremony, you find yourself back in the garden. No escort, no purpose, just you and the ghosts of memory that cling to jasmine vines. A servant passes and pauses. A young boy. You've seen him tending the herb beds. He bows, unsure. You ask, quietly, "Did she ever say goodbye?" He hesitates, then nods. "She left you something." He pulls a small cloth pouch from beneath his sash. "Said to give this if you ever looked like you needed it." Your hand closes around the pouch. It's warm from the boy's body. Inside, a pressed flower, a marigold, and a scrap of parchment with 4 words: "Do not forget spring." You close your eyes. You won't. Not ever. The garden is still, but it is not empty, and neither are you. Spring arrives with a deceptive gentleness, the kind that lures butterflies from their cocoons, and then reminds them, with a sudden breeze, that nothing stays warm forever. The day of your wedding dawns under a sky so blue it almost hurts to look at. You are dressed in garments of silk so fine they feel like whispers against your skin. Gold threads shimmer with every step you take. Jewels crust your turban. Your hands are painted with sandalwood paste. You look like the man they've always wanted you to become. A prince fit for tapestries, not for gardens. Trumpets sound low and distant. The procession begins. Elephants adorned in brocade move slowly, measuredly. Dancers twirl in practiced loops. The air smells of rose water and myrrh. Hundreds of eyes watch, but yours search the crowd for only one. She is not there. You knew she wouldn't be. Still, your gaze lingers. At the heart of the palace, beneath a canopy stitched by hand over many months, your bride awaits. She bows her head demurely. Her smile is delicate, controlled. She is everything expected of her, and nothing more. You kneel beside her. The priest begins his chants. Sacred fire flickers between you. Incense curls upward like questions without answers. The ritual unfolds in verses older than any empire. Vows are made, not yours, not hers, but the dynasty's. Promises inked in the air rather than the heart. You respond on cue, and somewhere deep inside, you feel yourself retreat, as if your spirit has slipped into the walls of the palace, watching from behind a carved screen, letting the body fulfill its duty. Later, when the music softens and the guests withdraw, you find yourself seated alone in your private chamber. The festivities continue in the halls beyond. Laughter, clinking goblets, silken footsteps. But within these walls, it is quiet, peaceful, almost, and unbearably lonely. Your bride enters. She is still adorned in her ceremonial veil, her movements slow. She sits at a respectful distance. The silence stretches. Then, to your surprise, she speaks. There is someone you loved, isn't there? You don't respond. She waits. It's all right, she says softly. I did not come here expecting love. Only respect. Your eyes meet. She lowers her veil. Her expression is unreadable, but her voice is kind. You may do as you wish. You need not pretend when it's just us. There is grace in her, a strength quiet enough to be mistaken for fragility. You bow your head. Thank you, you say. She stands. I'll leave you to your thoughts tonight. But before she does, she adds, I don't know her name, but I hope she was worth remembering. And then she is gone. You sit in the hush that follows. Somewhere outside, the garden waits. You rise. The moon is high by the time you reach the banyan tree. The air is still scented with night-blooming flowers. The same flowers she once whispered to, tended, sang to in moments when she thought no one was listening. You kneel, fingertips grazing the ground as if asking permission. The earth gives. You uncover the scroll. By the dim moonlight, you read what you once dictated, line by line, memory by memory. The poet's brushstrokes are steady, his script flowing like water over stone. You read the part about her smile, about her silence, about how love, when true, does not demand to be spoken. It simply is. And when you finish, you roll it once more. But you do not bury it again. You hold it close, heart pounding like a quiet drum. Then rise. Back inside the palace, you find a satchel. You place the scroll inside, along with the marigold and her note. Do not forget spring. You sit by the open window for the rest of the night, watching the garden sway beneath the stars. You're no longer sure if you're watching it or waiting for it to speak. The monsoon returns as if on cue, gentle at first, then insistent, like an old friend who refuses to knock. Rain lashes against the palace domes, cascading in silver sheets down carved marble gutters. You watch it from your balcony, sleepless, listening to the rhythmic tapping against your windows like distant drums echoing from another time. You still carry her note in your satchel, though its edges are beginning to soften with age. You've traced its words so many times, the ink has begun to smudge beneath your fingers. Do not forget spring. 4 simple words that have come to mean everything, and also nothing at all. Word has reached you that she and her family have left the city. The gardener, loyal to his pride, declined the palace's offer to stay on. A tree's roots must go where they're welcome," he told the steward. You think of him often, trimming away what no longer blooms, tending to earth and silence. And her, perhaps she now walks through a smaller garden, tending roses, with no fear of footsteps behind her. Or perhaps she no longer gardens at all. You'll never know. You're married now, in the most ceremonial sense of the word. Your bride is gracious, distant, and content to live on the edges of your shared duty. There is no cruelty between you, only a carefully curated peace. Some nights she sits across the room and reads poetry aloud, her voice soft and melodic. You close your eyes and let the words carry you somewhere else. You don't imagine she reads for your sake, but perhaps for her own. You've become a figure more than a man, portrait-worthy, garlanded with titles, but somehow less alive than you were under the neem tree. And then, one day, a letter arrives. It is addressed not to the prince, not to the royal household, but to the boy who once wore garden soil like perfume. No seal, no title. The handwriting is unfamiliar, careful. You break it open slowly, heart taut as a bowstring. It's not from her, but it is about her. A traveler who met her briefly in a village near the riverbanks. She works now in a small library beside a temple. She speaks softly, the traveler writes, and always carries a dried marigold pressed inside a book of poems. When asked where she learned to love gardens, she said, "I once knew someone who thought the moonlight was enough to grow jasmine." You reread the sentence until it blurs. You laugh, softly, painfully. You're not sure if you feel closer to her now or further away. Later, under the guise of inspecting a newly restored temple, you ride out beyond the city walls. You do not bring your guards. You dress plainly, wearing cotton instead of silk, dust instead of perfume. You carry only the satchel and the scroll and a dried marigold of your own. You don't expect to find her. You only want to see the kind of place she might belong to. The road is long. The rains have left puddles that reflect the sky like broken mirrors. Children bathe buffalo in the river, laughing without care. Women rinse saris at the edges of wells, their songs carrying over the wind. And there it is, a library so small it could fit inside your old chambers twice over. Stone walls warmed by the sun, a carved doorway with no gate, no guard, only flowering vines curling across the frame. You don't enter. You sit beneath a tree across the road and watch. Hours pass. A woman appears at the threshold, older than you remember, but with the same way of moving, like the wind hasn't quite caught up to her. She balances a stack of books in one arm, gestures gently to a child beside her, and disappears back inside. You say nothing. You do nothing. You don't speak her name. You let the moment pass like a cloud across the sun. Then you rise and walk away. Some love stories are not meant to be revisited, only remembered. You return to the palace with a clearer silence in your chest. That evening, you take out the scroll once more, but this time, instead of storing it away, you place it in the palace archives, not under your name, not hers either, simply filed under, on gardens and other acts of devotion. And then, for the first time in many months, you sleep. And you dream of spring, not as something lost, but as something that once was and might be again. In the palace gardens, time becomes a different kind of silence. Seasons have come and gone, each one leaving behind a quiet marker, a fallen petal, a forgotten scent, a path once walked together, now softened by moss. You stroll these paths often now, not as a searcher, not even as a mourner, but as someone learning the language of absence. You've begun to understand that longing is not always a wound. It can be a companion, a quiet one who sits beside you in the twilight and never asks questions. One morning, as the sun filters gold through the latticework, your steward presents a collection of guest petitions. Among them, a request from the city's new chronicler, a woman, young, curious. She seeks an audience to collect tales from the royal archives, especially personal histories, letters, and lesser-known stories. You pause. Something in the phrasing tugs at memory. Personal histories. You nod absent-mindedly. Send her in 3 days. When the day arrives, she enters with a modest bow and carries a stack of notebooks wrapped in linen. She is respectful, inquisitive, and not in the least overawed by palatial grandeur. Your Highness, she says, I believe some stories fall through the cracks of official history. I'm here to catch them. You offer a small smile. That depends on whether they wish to be caught. She grins, unfazed. As she speaks, you realize she's more interested in people than in politics. She wants to know what kept the emperor's musicians awake at night, what the gardeners whispered while pruning Tulsi, whether the library assistant ever fell in love while alphabetizing scrolls. You listen. And then, without quite meaning to, you speak. It starts with a single detail. There was once a jasmine bush beneath the eastern wall. No one knows it bloomed only for a single year. She tilts her head. That's poetic. Did someone tell you that? You pause. No, I was there. Her eyes flicker, but she doesn't press. You spend nearly an hour discussing the overlooked rhythms of palace life. You tell her about the early hours when ink was ground in silence, how the kitchen clattered long before the court ever stirred, and how sometimes, just before dawn, the wind carried the scent of earth soaked in rosewater. She thanks you. She leaves. But before she does, you slip her a scroll from the archive. On gardens and other acts of devotion, the label reads. No explanation. 2 weeks later, the library scribe returns. This time, not alone. With her is an artist, a painter from the Deccan, interested in depicting the forgotten corners of the empire, the laundry courtyards, the night lanterns of kitchen workers, the small balconies where queens once watched pigeons circle. Again, you find yourself speaking more than intended. You begin to wonder, what if memory is a garden that blooms only when tended aloud? So you begin writing, not proclamations, not edicts, letters, addressed to no one, or perhaps to everyone. They begin, to the one who once named every tree, or to the silence after her footsteps faded. You do not send them. You place them in an unmarked box. But somehow you feel lighter. Years pass. The library assistant, the artist, the chronicler, they come and go. They gather stories like petals in a windstorm. And your name, though still etched in coins and court documents, becomes a soft echo in their tales. They do not speak of the wars you managed to avoid, nor the decrees you reluctantly signed. They speak instead of the prince who remembered how jasmine bloomed in moonlight. One day, a new poem is recited at a city festival. It begins, there once was a prince who walked backwards through time, following footprints that led not to thrones, but to gardens. You do not correct them. Instead, you listen, and you feel that same strange warmth as when spring first whispered her name. Because maybe this is love, too. Not the fire that consumes, but the ember that remains. Years fold gently into each other, and time becomes a soft quilt stitched with quiet rituals. You wake earlier than most. The palace no longer bustles like it used to, not with urgency, at least. Everything breathes at a slower pace now. The court remains, of course. Dutiful ministers, seasonal petitions, the occasional flare of tension on distant borders. But your gaze seldom lingers there. Instead, you drift toward places less governed. The old gardener, now long past, has been succeeded by a granddaughter. She tends the same rose trellises and pomegranate trees, and you catch her sometimes speaking to the plants as if they were old friends. Perhaps they are. She reminds you of someone. One morning, she appears in your private courtyard, holding a clay bowl of soaked almonds, a peace offering, though no war has been waged. "My mother told me," she begins, eyes cast downward, "that once, when the monsoons failed, someone from the palace smuggled water to the lower garden. Just a few drops, enough to keep the jasmine alive." You nod, slow and careful. She remembered that? She said her mother was never certain who it was, but she always suspected the prince. You take an almond and smile. "I've heard he was very fond of jasmine." She smiles too, then leaves you in the hush of your own breath. That day, you return to the archives, not as emperor, but as a reader. The chronicler, the one who came years ago, has published several volumes: folk tales of the Mughal kitchen, portraits of anonymous letter writers, whispered gossip between queens long dead. Her style is irreverent, poetic, sometimes cheeky. But what you find in Volume 3 makes your hands still. A chapter titled "The Garden Letters, Unsent Confessions of a Mughal Heart." It is your handwriting, transcribed, translated, edited gently, but yours. The scrolls you once gave her, not as a formal offering, but casually, like slipping a petal under someone's door. Your name isn't mentioned. Instead, she begins with, "The author of these fragments remains unnamed, perhaps intentionally so. Perhaps it is better that way. These are not royal proclamations. These are small truths, whispered like prayer beads, clutched close to the heart." You read them aloud, to no one, and yet to someone. "I do not know what love is meant to look like in palaces, but I know the sound it makes when her laughter cracked my spine open like a thunderclap. One night, she showed me a toad hiding beneath a leaf. We did not speak of politics again for the rest of our time together." You close the book, and for a long while, you simply sit. Later, during an unusually cool spring evening, the court musicians perform an unfamiliar composition, a gentle piece built from slow strings and the echo of ankle bells. One of the court poets leans over and murmurs, "They call this the gardener's raga." You say nothing, but you stay until the final note fades. The next morning, a child, a prince from your nephew's line, asks if he can plant something in the garden. You agree, and together you choose a spot near the eastern wall. The boy insists on digging the first hole himself. It is clumsy, joyful work. The boy wipes his brow and declares, "This will be a mango tree, but only for the birds." You laugh, caught off guard. "Why only for the birds?" "Because they always come back," he replies, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. Something in you softens like wet clay. That evening, you write again, not in formal script, but with your original ink brush, the one you once used to write her name on lotus petals, just for the fun of it. This time, you write for yourself, but also for her. A new letter begins. You would have liked this boy. He reminds me of sunlight breaking through closed shutters. You seal the letter, fold it carefully, and place it beneath the pot of tulsi on your windowsill. A quiet offering in a palace that no longer feels lonely. Spring turns to summer with a familiar slowness, the heat arriving like an old friend, uninvited, yes, but no longer unwelcome. You find that even the harshest season carries with it moments of quiet revelation. The mango tree begins to sprout, just a sapling, but determined. Every morning, the boy visits it, and so do you, though you pretend not to. It's easier that way, less ceremony, more truth. You begin a new habit, walking the outer gardens at dusk, just as the lamps are being lit and the parrots quiet down. The air smells of coriander and dust. Sometimes a servant or two tries to accompany you, but you wave them away with a gentle flick of the hand. You prefer solitude now, not the bitter kind, but the meditative kind, the kind where memories flow in like warm river water. One evening, under a particularly rose-heavy pergola, you pause. The scent hits you square in the chest, heady and intoxicating. You close your eyes and are immediately pulled backward, years collapsing like silk between fingers. You're standing again in the same spot where she once dared you to name every flower in bloom. "You forget the night, Jasmine," she whispered, pointing to the faint glow of blossoms behind you. "It only blooms when no one is looking," she added. And you knew, then and there, that she was talking about herself. Now, you find your voice, cracked with time, but resolute. "Still blooming," you murmur to the air. You do not expect an answer, but a peacock lets out a sound, half shriek, half song, and for some reason, it feels like punctuation. That night, you sit by the open window and listen to the city sleep. The bazaar, once noisy and stubborn, now sighs into itself. Even the guards walk more softly these days. You begin writing again. This time, not letters, but stories, short ones, vignettes, things you remember with an almost embarrassing vividness. The way she would tie her sash unevenly, always rushing. The precise sound of her sneezing, like a startled dove. The time she painted a smiley face on a clay pot and insisted it was a royal artifact. You write about her hair in the rain, her disdain for cucumber pickles, her fierce defense of a street dog that once followed you both back to the palace gates. Each memory is a small seed, and you're planting them on paper like wildflowers. No plan, just abundance. Some stories end mid-sentence. You leave them that way. One afternoon, your chief archivist visits. He's brought new scrolls, treaties, tax records, trade proposals. But your eyes drift toward the parcel under his arm, clearly not from the treasury. He notices. From the chronicler, he says. She's sent a final volume. You take it gently, as though it were glass. This one is bound in fabric. A garden green with embroidery of birds in flight. Inside, a dedication for those whose love was never meant for the records. You are still written. The last chapter is short. A meditation on silence, on the things that remain when words vanish. You recognize the tone. It's hers. Even now, she manages to tease meaning out of nothing, to name the night jasmine in the dark. That evening, as a monsoon storm builds on the horizon, you gather a few scrolls, your favorites, and read them aloud to the mango sapling. The boy joins you halfway through. He sits cross-legged and listens, occasionally yawning, always respectful. At one point, he asks, "Was she real?" You look at the sky. The clouds are violet and restless. "Yes," you say, then pause. But not in the way palaces define real. He nods, thoughtful, then rests his head on your shoulder. In this moment, you feel the past, present, and future breathing together. You do not cry. You've done all the mourning and all the remembering. Now, you're simply living again, quietly and well. The monsoon rains come as expected, early and extravagant. Roofs glisten, courtyards flood, and the palace smells like damp stone and rose oil. You find the sound oddly comforting now, each droplet tapping like a gentle reminder that life is still occurring, second by second. One morning, the gardener, the boy's mother, approaches you. She brings guavas in a wide brass bowl, freshly picked, speckled with tiny bruises. "He misses her too," she says, without naming names. You nod. The guavas are sour sweet, and you savor them slowly. The boy is now nearly a young man, taller, less talkative, more observant. He watches how the world unfolds, how people choose their silences. He has the gift of stillness, just like his mother. You teach him calligraphy. He's clumsy at first, but he doesn't give up. His fingers learn to glide. His wrist learns patience. He starts signing his name on everything: leaves, stones, bits of cloth. One day, he signs her name too, not in sadness, just in tribute. You decide to open the east wing, the part of the palace that has been closed for years. Dust cloaked the furniture like snow. Peacocks had made a home on the balcony. Yet as you enter, nothing feels foreign. This was where she once rehearsed a dance, awkwardly and adorably, believing herself unseen. Where she stored her plant sketches and borrowed scrolls and her one pair of embroidered slippers, always mismatched. The room still smells faintly of turmeric and sandalwood. You let it remain untouched. Instead, you create a new space just adjacent to it. A room of records, but not imperial ones, not treaties or alliances, personal ones, letters that were never sent, poems never finished, doodles on scrap parchment, petal-pressed notes exchanged in hurried moments. You title it, unofficially, The Archive of Almost. No guards, no protocol, just you, the boy, and the stories. Sometimes visitors come, not ministers or dignitaries, just curious souls. A young midwife from Agra, a dancer from Lahore, a caravan cook who said her great-grandmother once served in the palace kitchen. They read the fragments, whisper them aloud, ask quiet questions, and in doing so, they stitch something invisible back together. One visitor, a teacher from the eastern provinces, leaves behind a small folded paper. You find it later that evening. On it, in careful script, "We never needed permission to be remembered." You place it inside the archive under a smooth river stone. The monsoon slowly withdraws, leaving behind a landscape rinsed clean. Mangoes ripen. Lotuses bloom. The river hums again. You take longer walks now, past the outer gardens and into the older fields where wild grasses grow untamed. The boy sometimes races ahead, always circling back to walk beside you. One day, you stop beneath an ancient neem tree. Its bark is rough, weathered, familiar. "This is where I first saw her," you say. The boy nods. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. In that pause, in that sacred stillness, you feel time settle, not as a weight, but as a blanket, soft, warm, forgiving. The years as they tend to do, keep slipping forward. Seasons roll into each other like painted scrolls being gently unfurled. Summer tastes of lime and mint. Winter curls around the palace like a silk shawl. All hush and hearth. You move more slowly now, not from sadness, but from reverence. You've learned to walk as if memory itself were sacred ground. The archive of almost grows. Visitors begin leaving offerings, small ones. A piece of embroidery stitched with a name, a sprig of jasmine tied in ribbon, a song written in the margins of a shipping ledger. You do not catalog them. You simply place them where they seem to belong. One day, an old man arrives, wrapped in a woolen shawl, eyes like slivers of quiet glass. He says little, just asks to sit by the eastern room. You serve him tea and sweetened rice. He nods toward the door, the one that's never opened. She danced there once, he says, voice grainy as worn sandalwood. You nod. She did. He smiles, says nothing else. By evening, he is gone. The boy, now fully a young man, has begun restoring the southern terrace, not out of duty, out of love. He carves vines into the woodwork, twisting and blooming in homage to a sketch he once found among her belongings. You recognize it instantly, a climbing bougainvillea that used to grow along the outer wall. She said they bloom better when you don't watch them too much, he murmurs, half grinning. He has her sense of mischief and her wisdom. The prince, your prince, finds peace in teaching. He begins offering lessons under the banyan tree in the main courtyard. Children come with inkwells and chalk. Elders come just to listen. He speaks of astronomy, but somehow always returns to the importance of names, of stories, of leaving behind more than monuments. One lesson ends with this question. What is a palace, if not a memory we let others walk through? No one answers aloud, but you can see it in their eyes. They understand. On the eve of a harvest moon, you find a letter tucked into your own pillow. It is written in her hand. You recognize the curve of the Y, the almost smudged ink from a rainy morning. She must have left it years ago, tucked beneath a lining, waiting until it chose to be found. It reads, "If they tell you my story vanished, remind them you kept breathing for me. If they say the garden forgot me, remind them you replanted it. If they ask what we were, tell them we were a moment that bloomed wide enough to become a history." You fold the letter. You do not cry. You smile. That evening, for the first time in many years, Music plays softly in the central courtyard. A single sitar, a gentle drum, no dancers, no ceremony, just sound, floating upward like incense. You sit by the balcony, tea in hand, listening. Below, the young man laughs at something an old gardener says. The stars press quietly against the velvet sky. And you? You close your eyes, not to forget, but to remember everything exactly as it was. And now, with your head resting gently on your pillow, and your breathing slow and steady, let the sounds of this story fade softly into the quiet night. You've wandered the gardens of a forgotten palace, walked down corridors perfumed with rosewater and sandalwood. You've heard the laughter of a gardener's daughter echo through time, and watched a young prince learn how to carry love not as burden, but as legacy. These were no grand battles, no royal decrees, no thunderous triumphs etched in stone. Just petals in the breeze, letters never sent. A moment lived honestly and deeply, then let go like a whispered goodbye. As you drift further into sleep, imagine the sky above that old Mughal palace, the same sky you sleep under now. The stars don't care for titles, and the moon forgets who built what and when. But stories linger. They nest in jasmine leaves, in old ink, in the cracks of memory passed gently from one heart to the next. So let the softness of this tale wrap around you like silk. Let the quiet hum of history lull you deeper, where no footsteps echo and no clocks tick. You're safe here, loved here, and remembered always. Good night, my friend.